All right, today I'm for the love of sports. I have my new friend Joe Dupriest, managing partner and co-founder of NextUp Ventures, co-founder of Yellow Devils Sports, former CMO of the Washington Wizards and Washington Capitals, former executive with the Philadelphia Eagles and Washington Redskins. I guess that is it. Joe, how are you today?
Doing great. How you doing?
It's a good day to be alive. It's a beautiful Monday morning. The Northeast is starting to warm up a little bit, so I'm a much, much happier person. So that's all we can ask
Very
for, right?
nice. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's a little warm down here in Atlanta, a little rainy, but it's all is good down here.
Well, when it was 46 degrees and snowing here last week, I'm sure you would have preferred to be in Atlanta. I can almost guarantee that one. So
Absolutely.
let you look at that. So, Joe, first question I have for everybody on the For the Love of Sports podcast is, why do you love sports so much?
I mean, I grew up in Atlanta, so it was a rough time growing up in the '80s. People talk about the Braves, how awesome it was. The World Series. It's like I was 15 years old before that happened.
Mhm.
So growing up a Braves fan, a Hawks fan, a Falcons fan. I mean, you start to love sports. You don't love winning quite as much because you don't know what it's like. But
Mhm.
yeah, I grew up around it. It's great environment down here. I was gone from Atlanta for about 20 years, just moved back. But yeah, he's always been a huge fan. I never played a lot growing up. My kids are getting into it now, softball and golf. I tried a little bit of everything, but I was always just a fan of watching it. And then as I grew, became more about the business itself and
Mhm.
how that's run. When John Sherholtz was building the Braves, really got interested in the behind the scenes aspects of it. So
Yeah,
that's
the
sort of how I
Braves.
got here.
The Braves specifically are a really interesting team, and kind of, this might be an interesting topic to touch on, especially with your work in the TV space. But them and their Turner deal, I talked to people from the middle of the country that are nowhere near Atlanta, and they're like, yeah, I mean, they were kind of on TBS all the time, so I just watched the Braves, and that pitching staff was incredible, and Chipper Jones and Andrew
Yep.
Jones. How, like, is it weird when you're kind of just going around the country meeting Braves fans? I mean, it's one thing, I'm up here in the Northeast, so Yankees fans, you'll find them everywhere. That is what it is. But do you find the same thing kind of with the Braves because of that TBS deal a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially with, the TBS deal will still go under the 91, 92 years and beyond. My wife's from North Carolina, but, everybody there was a Braves fan.
Mhm.
It's everywhere you go across the country. It's interesting now with the new generation, it wasn't like that, but everybody my age that I meet all over the country, either they were a fan. I mean, nobody hates the Braves. It seems like, from that, people, had an affinity for them a bit. And, it's always fun to talk, Dale Murphy and Bob Horner and, Glavine and Smoltz and all
Mhm.
those. So it's a connection you have with people almost all over the country.
Yeah, and again, it's just it's an interesting connection because now it's super easy. You get MLB TV and you can watch any team out of market and it doesn't matter, right?
Yep.
It's or ESPN Plus and you can watch all these games, when they're actually on. But it's maybe the Braves had something. Maybe they're a little ahead of the curve there. So I think it's pretty interesting how they've been able to do it. And obviously, again, the connection to what you've been able to do creating over the top networks, I think is pretty cool.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and I experienced a little bit from the other side too. I mean, you had WGN, all the Cubs
Yep.
games,
Hmm.
Mets games too. So I was never a big fan of those, but I watched a lot of their games. I knew the players, more so back in the '80s and early '90s. It was an easy way to follow other teams, so I kind of know what it's like being on the other end.
Yeah, we had some Cubs games up here as well, WGN. So we were stacked: Phillies, Mets, Cubs, Yankees. We go. I always had someone to root against. So that was kind of nice being a Mets fan. Never really that good. There's a few years scattered here and there, so it was
Right.
always very interesting. But as you said, you never really played sports. You always loved them. Was it kind of a goal of yours to always work in sports, or how was your mindset, especially going into college, down in Georgia Tech, and then, eventually going to business school at, Let's Go Duke? What, like, was the opportunity presented to you, or was it always the goal of yours to get into sports?
No, it never really was. Growing up, I always knew I'd go to Georgia Tech. It was always I was going to be an engineer. That's just what I was going to do. And so, I went to Tech. Started there in '95. But as I got in there, it was always on an affinity for the analytics side. Which later in my sports career played an interesting role in it. But it was always something kind of in the back of my mind. Hey, sports could be interesting. So actually, when I was a freshman at Georgia Tech, one of the things that we had to do was go and do a project with somebody in the field we're interested in. Most people would go find other engineers, whatever. I dropped an email to Dean Taylor, who was the assistant GM with the Braves back then. And so I just dropped a letter to him. It wasn't really email back then so much, but sure enough, he wrote me back. I met in his office at Fulton County Stadium and, kind of got the behind the scenes look. And that's what really kind of got the itch for me there too. I went into engineering, coming out of tech. I still did that for a few years, but always kind of with the idea of, I'd love to get back into sports, even while I was in Memphis at FedEx. talk to, the AAA team there and kind of, poke around a little bit. But once I got to Duke, that was fully my goal, was to get into sports.
That's really interesting. And would you look at that, as you said, you kind of just dropped the line to somebody and it kind of turned into an entire other avenue. I mean, I guess why did you go to engineering school? If like you said, this was kind of, it doesn't sound like it was mandated, but I'm just kind of
Sure.
curious, like why?
I mean, I always had an affinity for math, the calculus, everything else. I mean, growing up, science classes, I was always good at it. I enjoy that side of it. So it seemed natural. Well, that's what I enjoy. That's what I'll do with a full-time job. It kind of turned out of, yeah, I enjoy doing it, but not necessarily 40, 50 hours a week sitting in front of spreadsheets and that sort of stuff. I'd rather apply those skills to a business I cared more about. So that's sort of how I transitioned out of it. But growing up, yeah, you're into math and science, and Georgia Tech's down the road, and Georgia started the Hope Scholarship with the lottery. So of course, that's where I'm going to go. And so, glad I did. That analytic background really set me up nicely for where sports went over the next decade. But yeah, it was, sports as a career back when I was in middle school and early high school wasn't really in my head, even though I was a big sports fan.
And then, so how did you eventually get your first job? I mean, obviously having the, a little stint there with the Braves for a second and helping them out. I mean, working with some of their higher ups is fantastic. And so how did you get that first job in sports? And I guess where on the timeline does that fall?
Yeah, so technically my first job with sports was with the Braves. So when, after that project, I got hooked up with their game day staff. And so I was flipping burgers, running the hospitality tents. And yeah, back in 96, 97. So I was the last year of Fulton County Stadium, the first year of Turner Field, that awful series with the Leyritz homer, and, thought we had back-to-back titles and didn't quite work out for us. But I was working game days, got exposed to it then when I was in college. But then when I went back to Duke, that was my goal, as I mentioned, really getting into sports. So I probably talked to anybody and everybody I could, a couple hundred different phone calls over the course of a couple of years. I got lucky that, the Durham Bulls were right down the street at Duke, and they'd never had an NBA intern. And so, yeah, I was able to really create my own, so I talked to, John Bishop, the assistant GM there, which he's, with the NBA now, still a really good friend. I met up with him and, a couple guys there like, well, we've never done this before, but yeah, let's give it a shot, come on out and, market research and, analytics behind their group sales and ticketing. That was my summer project. So that was sort of my first real, foray into it. And he really got the minor league experience too. I was up, 6 a.m. pulling tarps and all that good stuff you get in minor league ball. So that was my first, really in the office experience with it. That was back in 2003 at Duke. And then coming out of Duke, through the course of those conversations, it's kind of a right place, right time. They say you kind of get lucky, and I did, but it was probably my 200th phone call. Steve Ryan, who works with the Cardinals now, but he was with the Eagles. Back then, he was another Duke undergrad. And so he introduced me to this other guy, Tim McDermott, who had just started with the Eagles as director of marketing, HBS guy. You guys got the NBA thing going. You guys should chat. I did. I talked to Tim for an hour on the phone. Okay, come on up to Philly, spend the summer here, see where it goes. And packed up the car, went to Philly, and that was the Super Bowl year there with Donovan and Tia. So it's a fun time to be there. And so that led to, a full-time gig with the Eagles. I met a lot of people at the Redskins. That's how I spent the year there. And, Tim, who really became my mentor, we spent, several years there together. He's the one that brought me down to the Caps as well when he became CMO down there. So it's just kind of interesting how it all played out off of one phone call at Duke, which was the 200th phone call over a couple of years. And that's the one that paid off.
I was going to say, it's the 200, it's the 199 you made before it though, right? Until you get to that one, which I think is a really important part of the story for anybody just, looking to get into the world of sports, especially now with kind of all the upheaval and everything going crazy in the world. Like, you really do have to put in a significant amount of work to really just find that one, one phone call that's going to come through. And I think it's interesting. And I guess, as you said, you were very humble about it, saying, hey, you guys both went to Duke. Hey, you guys are both, you have MBAs like that. That's a connection. But clearly you were doing something to set yourself apart, not just going to Duke, not just having an MBA. What was it that these gentlemen saw in you that they kept passing your name along, that they kept wanting to promote you and push you up the chain of command to get you into the places like the Philadelphia Eagles, the Washington Redskins, and the Capitals as well?
Yeah, I think it was an interesting time in sports. When you go back to business school back then, like I said, I started in 2002 at Duke, and the question was always, "Hey, is an MBA valued in sports?" And at the time, for the most part, the answer was no. I mean, it would, but it all depended on who was hiring you. Did the person hire you have one? And that was the time when it was really switching from a really heavy focus on people that had been in sports 20 years. That's how you get promoted. You start in the ticket office, work your way up, and which is still awesome and happens a lot. But it was, so we're starting to look more of outside of sports and unique backgrounds and experiences to come in. And so I was kind of fortunate to ride that wave a little bit. And so it was really my analytic background is what tied it in. That's where CRM was first becoming big. I mean, there were no analytics departments in sports teams then. When I got to the Caps in 2007, we built the first one. I hired the first guy who was another Georgia Tech guy, Lehigh engineering, similar engineering background, that I actually met at a panel up at NYU. When I was, sitting with 4 or 5 guys, this guy was in the audience, and we became good friends, and I hired him. First analytic guy. Now I think Monumental has 10, 12 full-time analytics. Almost every large sports organization has it, but back then you really didn't. So I was able to bring something unique to the table, and since they had no experience, they didn't really know if I was good at it or not, but I could talk the language, and we figured it out. And from a just simple fan surveying type stuff and the analytics behind it and regressions, and when I was at Duke as well, did a project with the Hurricanes, really analyzing their ad spend, where ticket sales coming from, and it was regression analysis like that. Nobody was doing that at the time, so it really kind of pioneered something new. So that type of stuff is something I was able to kind of take to the next spot, and it really gave me a story to tell that resonated with people.
And that's just crazy, right? Like in 2007, there were still major sports teams that didn't have analytics departments. And now all you hear about in sports is analytics, analytics, analytics. I mean, baseball being a huge one, football you're hearing coming around, basketball, obviously the Sloan Conference and everything that they've been doing. How have you seen, I mean, like, what is it like being a pioneer in something like that? And I know obviously you're on the marketing and, as you said, the ticketing and the fan engagement side, but I'm assuming there's some connection and correlation between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was, and they weren't separate to start with, and so I met another guy, Ken Catanella. He's with the Sacramento Kings. I met up with him when he was looking at starting at Duke, and he was pioneering it on the basketball side. He ended up going to Fuqua as well, and caught on with a bunch of teams and had been hugely successful. But yeah, it was right then. It was analytics of any kind were brand new, and so you could kind of create your own roles, create your own projects. Carve your own way, and then find other people to kind of bring along with you too. So, like I said, it started with just a couple of people, and then you got more specialized, breaking apart how do you look at sponsorship valuation, ticket sales, and then you start getting into dynamic ticketing and all of those type things. And a lot of people would go outside to the third parties, but then everybody started building it on their internal teams. And so just to kind of watch that and be a part of it was really interesting. And so it hit the perfect timing for me. So
yeah, I'd say, that's just perfect that you went to Georgia Tech and you've done all this. It's just, I love kind of hearing stories like this and how these stars align. But obviously, again, you had to make those 200 phone calls to get to where you got to. So clearly, immense amount of hard work and determination is also very important. And with that, I mean, what is it like being able to see an industry shift in front of your eyes because of something that you've been able to do? Like, at what point did you realize, like, I personally and my team that I'm building, we are making a huge impact for these teams and these players and these leagues? Like, how quickly did you start to see the needle move on the stuff that you guys were implementing?
I mean, it came across pretty quick because there's so many trends were coming along at the same time, both from go back to the Moneyball and that sort of stuff, but to really see some of these models, and they start realizing, hey, we're not optimizing ticket prices. Well, what do we charge for sponsorship? Sponsors are looking at it as, well, what ROI am I getting? I don't know. You just bought that sign, and it looked pretty, and we put it out there. But the need on the sponsorship side, was a big driver of it too, to now be able to answer those questions and really justify from an impression standpoint, from a, looking at it more like other media, and, the timing of the economy then, dollars were tight, and, really changed, the way sponsorship dollars were, and so to be able to go into those pitches in a different way and present different data and really look at it like every other business out there was doing, was, to see the reactions on some of this stuff, and to, really, look at optimizing, ticket sales and that sort of stuff, and see your cost per ticket sold, that sort of stuff, as that started moving. I mean, that made, really, really big impacts immediately. You could show, what's happening. And then when other people started calling to see what we're doing, that's what, really tips you off. It started when I was, working on CRM back with the Eagles, and, I was, calling people all over the league that were, just starting to take a look at, the smart DMs and the Microsofts of the world, and some of those that were really just starting to come on. And then we're suddenly on the other end, people are calling us to see what we're doing from a ticketing, sponsorship, valuation, turnkey, was really becoming big then too, from a, customer measurement standpoint and what they were doing, and it was really interesting to, have those conversations and help guide it a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I could only imagine, that must have been pretty, very validating, as, having other teams and other people reach out to you and be like, hey, you guys are doing some cool stuff over there.
Yep.
What exactly
it's a great way to network.
Yeah.
It's a great way to network around the leagues too. You really get to know a lot of your counterparts around the league, and, it was really a good way to meet a lot of people. And through that, that's how I ended up with the Redskins too. I got to know them really well. And when they were looking for somebody on the marketing side to help with their premium sales and really look at that from a different way, that's how I ended up landing there, was just through those various conversations, and they never stopped.
And you hung out in the Washington, D.C. area for a little while, as you said, with the Redskins, as I mentioned before, with the Capitals, with the Wizards. Obviously it seems like you climbed the ranks relatively quickly because you were a huge value add and getting, as you said, the ticket sales, the sponsorship, and all these different opportunities, as long as we're affecting the bottom line, right? And you're affecting it in a very good and positive way, people are going to want you on their team in some capacity. Like how quickly did it go from, hey, let's look at some of these analytics, wow, this is really cool, to being just a major driver, to the point where you're then, the opportunity to become CMO of a couple of these teams was not even a question at that point, because you were so damn good at what you did.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting timing too, and, having Alex Ovechkin and, the team were doing what they were doing, it makes me look a lot smarter too, I'm not going to lie. And so I started there in 2007. And when I first started there, it was Backstrom's rookie year. They'd just gone back to the red, white, and blue. But I remember my first preseason game I was working. I mean, you could have thrown tickets on the sidewalk. People wouldn't have picked them up and come in. I mean, there was nobody there. You could tell they were building something, but it was still very early on. And so as the team started to take off, you could really feel something was different with it. In that time, now you're having conversations with sponsors that you weren't having before. Before, when I got there, you worked for the Washington Capitals. I would have to clarify, it's the hockey team. Back in 07, 08, that was still, I mean, they were popular, but it wasn't a big, huge brand. People didn't have cup visions back then. I mean, people knew where it was kind of heading with Ovi and those guys. But, those needs, now people are, clamoring for tickets, and, sponsorship is starting to open up. And, from a digital standpoint, the way people are interacting with the team is becoming a lot different. And so I was fortunate to kind of be able to ride that wave. So Tim McDermott was the CMO. So he, brought me down from the Eagles with him. So he was CMO. A few years later, he went back to the Eagles. And so with what we had done, so when he went back to the Eagles to become their CMO, that's when I was able to kind of step up into that role. And then, from there, Monumental, sort of, got formed around the time he was leaving, when we brought in the Wizards and the Mystics and Verizon Center at the time. And so as that sort of came together, it was something exciting was happening every year. The team was getting better. There was a new tech piece coming along, and, working for, Ted Leonsis and, that group. And I even got the pleasure of, reporting directly to him. And there's no better experience than that to really see the inner workings there and kind of, get that attention. And so I was really fortunate to kind of ride the wave of, teams getting better, the digital footprint is expanding. People in DC, it's a transient city, but they're excited, seeing what was happening with youth hockey at the time. 30 rinks in the area. We were working with all of them to see the growth there and the excitement. every kid wants to be number 8. Now you're going into schools with street hockey and kids are getting excited about it. And so it just all really kind of came together at the right time. But, it became a big aspect of how do you measure what we're doing? How do we know we're going to the right place? How do we know now it's time to go to Baltimore? How do you know now it's time for a Winter Classic? That sort of stuff. And so, but I think we rode a really nice wave there for a long time. And, it became almost the reverse that, the team was winning, but they never made it out past the second round. But the excitement around the team, it got bigger and bigger every year and every year. Fortunately, eventually, hopefully it's not a coincidence that right after I left, they won a cup. But it was exciting. It wasn't the cup winning, but there was hope and excitement and a great ownership group and a great staff, great team, great personality players. All of that came together at the right time.
It felt like for like 5 years, it was the Caps year. It's the Caps year. It's the Caps year. Finally, it did happen. Maybe, I don't believe in coincidences, Joe, so I do apologize. Maybe it did have something to do with you. But no, I just think it's so cool that, as you said, like a couple stars definitely aligned. I mean, getting Backstrom, having Ovechkin, just being, one of the, and now it's very clear he's easily one of the greatest hockey players of all time. He's probably going to pass Wayne Gretzky in goals if he plays, 2 more seasons, I think, depending on what happens with this year. So I'm excited to see what happens there. And taking advantage of that, though, as you kind of posed all the questions, and I'll kind of just ask you, like, how do you know when it's time to do a Winter Classic? How do you know when it's time to, do a rebrand or at least put out that DC style uniform? Like what do the numbers have to tell you when you see, like, what are you looking for to say, okay, like this is, I know there's no perfect time and it's very subjective, of course. But when you see those numbers, is it, okay, this is, we have enough people. We think we could do an outdoor game. Like, let's do a Winter Classic. Now, what goes into that decision-making? And then what goes into executing that, especially from the marketing standpoint?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we were measuring everything. I mean, we had, our own internal group doing it, but we had, whether it's, diving into Scarborough, we partnered up with Turnkey on a lot of our research data. We launched, one of the first things we did was launch what we call Club Scarlet. It was the first female fan club in the NHL. And we launched that, looked at the data a year later, tracking it, and it doesn't all tie to that, certainly, but the female fan base was growing faster than the male fan base over the next 2 years. Like, we're onto something here. You're looking at youth participation in hockey, looking at those numbers. I mean, that was a big driver of it. Looking at TV ratings, particularly up in the Baltimore area, and how those were growing. As a team, one thing that was interesting, the GM of was First Mariner, now Royal Farms Arena up in Baltimore, we started talking to a promoter up there. The Caps minor league team used to play up there. So that idea, we're like, well, the excitement is there in Baltimore. We're seeing the percent of fans from Baltimore coming in. We're seeing the TV numbers going there. Maybe it makes sense to take a preseason game there. And so, just that overall, the excitement measurements that we're seeing and seeing where the ticket sales are coming through, where the heat maps are, and as it starts moving around the DC area, and there's more coming from the Baltimore area now than there were before, whereas before it was, maybe more Northern Virginia, maybe, right out in Maryland, on the west side. So, seeing those trends could kind of really tell. I mean, you never really know. I mean, you tease it out there and some of the ideas and see if people start getting excited about stuff. And fortunately, they did. The Baltimore game was really cool to be able to do that, to create a new product up there. And eventually, we did it for the Wizards as well. For the Cats, we played Boston in the preseason game, sold out arena. I mean, it was awesome. And so, to be a part of some of that stuff, it's. Somewhat you get lucky and you hope it works out. And fortunately, all of these did. With the Winter Classic, it was working with the NHL. Fortunately, you look at when you've got some of the best players in the world, and you're getting the national exposure that some other teams aren't getting. That helps out as well, because there's a lot of tickets to be sold there. Certainly, going to Pittsburgh and playing that first one, helped. It was a good learning experience for us, and to be able to see that, and then bring it to Nats Park and do our own. But we had a focus group of women that we would tap into from the Club Scarlet. We had an advisory panel that we would use, thousands of fans that we would email out, surveys, measuring anything and everything. We had a season ticket advisory board that one of our heads of analytics ran for a couple of years. He would really give us the insights, really throw different ideas against the wall, and would see what happened. And we were always talking to fans. I mean, that was part of it was the accessibility, which again comes back to tech. A lot of owners aren't that accessible to fans, so we really took that and took it the next level too, of constantly communicating with fans and getting a pulse on where's their interest, what's driving their interest, how much is it tied to winning, how much is it tied to what we're doing with kids in the community and that sort of stuff. And so you're to look into that, and it can't be a once a year thing. It's got to be a every month, every week, getting into the head of the fan, to know when it's time to move on something.
And it makes sense. I mean, it's so interesting to hear when people, when the fans start clamoring about something and you don't hear any movement on it from the team side or the league side. I mean, you hear it all the time with the NFL. They pretty much just do not care about what the fans think, in my opinion. And I mean, they're still on top of the world. So maybe the joke's on us. Maybe we don't know, but it's just always very interesting to me. And I mean, in a sport like hockey, where, let's be very honest, it's 4 out of the 4 major sports here in the United States. The markets aren't nearly as big as they are for, basketball or the NFL, especially. What was it like then, really just trying to give the fans that voice, and how it doesn't sound that difficult, especially again with some of these stars. And that's one thing the NHL, the MLB gets discredited for as well, not really promoting the stars as much, but you see Alexander Ovechkin everywhere. So I have to give you kudos for that. So congratulations, you're doing something right. But I mean, what was that like, and how easy was it to make those connections to, okay, this is what the fans want, how can we execute upon that and just give them what they're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's the players themselves too. Some players aren't as into doing that type of stuff. Ovi was awesome and would do anything in the community asking. Backstrom's the same way. I mean, a lot of really good personality guys. Again, it comes down from Ted to the coaches to the GM. I love working with George McPhee. He was, and you see what he did in Vegas later on. But it was a phenomenal group to be able to get out there. If the players aren't into it, then it's really not going to work. And it was a community connection too, going to schools and really getting FaceTime with the kids and teaching them street hockey in their gyms, that sort of stuff. And we were really fortunate there. I mean, and part of it too comes down to a balance. The NFL is interesting because for the most teams don't have to sell tickets. They're going to be. I remember when I was at the Eagles. I mean, we had a wait list, but nobody ever comes off of it. Nobody ever gives up their tickets. And so you can really focus on other stuff and creating new properties and new ways to engage. With the NHL and the NBA, not league wide, but, a Tuesday, against a mediocre opponent when the team's not great, you got to sell those tickets. And so at what point you got to be careful about cannibalizing yourself and the other things that you're asking people to do. You can only ask people to do so much. Mm-hmm. And it's, and what is that mentality of, all right, yeah, I'll go to a game with my friend. All right, now I'll buy my own ticket. Now I'll buy a mini plan. Maybe eventually I'll become a season ticket holder. Now I'm going to go to these other events, but you got to step them through that. And you can't, if you start cannibalizing yourself and the ticket sales go down, which, the NFL, again, they don't really have to worry about that as much. I mean, some teams, but for the most part, they're creating those additional revenue streams. So we had to be careful as we started growing of when's the right time for this stuff. But our goal was always to have, we see ourselves as a 365-day-a-year sport. If you're an NHL team and you're only focusing on those 80 games, you're doing a disservice, and it's never going to become, part of people's daily lives. So our goal was, thinking when the NFL's done it better than anybody else. They're a 12-month-a-year sport. And so the events they've created. So we focused on that too. Becoming top of mind every day was important to us, and having something for somebody at every price point too. Everybody's not going to be a season ticket holder. Everybody's not going to be a suite holder. We have to have free events. We have to have ways to connect with the kids. So at every price point, we have something for everybody and an opportunity for them to connect to it. We had free fan events. We had paid fan events. We had every type of ticket package that you could imagine. And the more that we could connect to people, which, as the economy starts going down too, especially back then, people start prioritizing what's important in their own lives. And, if you're just a ticket that you go and have fun with, you're probably going to drop down that. But if, hey, this is a part of my daily life, I'm going to miss out on this. Maybe I'm not buying as many tickets, but now I'm going to go to this fan event, which then we're going to be able to sponsor it because we've got these 5,000 people coming out. Training camp is free. You can come out anytime and watch the guys practice. We can be 5 feet from Alex Ovechkin at the Iceplex, watch him practice every morning. Doesn't cost you a thing. And so, having that connection point at every price point, and the 12-month calendar, I think was important to us to really establish in the community.
I love that. And I think it's very important, right? Having all those different price points and having different opportunities, because again, you're in a a metro area, right? DC
Right.
is a city, right? So you're going to have people of all different backgrounds and all different socioeconomic levels that you want to engage all of them, right? As you said, you're already going into the schools, you're doing killer with the female fans of the brand and what's happening there. So I think again, it's a really interesting way of looking at it. But again, it just makes sense. And it's so frustrating, being a Mets fan and seeing just all the dumb stuff that baseball does, and just kind of constantly rolling my eyes at like, yep, baseball did it wrong again. I mean, look, they're in the news for the worst possible thing. None of these other sports are arguing with each other, right? They're just
Right.
kind of behind the scenes doing what they need to do to get everything done. But that's baseball, Susan. So with that, I mean, starting to then get into the NBA aspect of it, how different was it when starting to work with the Wizards, and now kind of being, almost straddling this fence and working in these two different areas? How different did things get when now you're going to while Ovechkin helped the Capitals become a global brand, especially through Russia and everything that's going, like, in Europe, obviously they play hockey there, Canada, but what was it like then going to the NBA, where it's a truly, they're in India, they're in China every year. What was it like going to this even bigger global brand with now stars like John Wall and Bradley Beal?
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely under a microscope more because now you're looking, everything's on a national level. I mean, it was like I said, I got lucky a bit with Ovi and Backstrom. When I jumped over to the Wizards side, that's when Wall was really taking off, and they drafted Beal. And similar to when I was on the Cap side, they relaunched the red, white, and blue, going back to more of like a bullets view to it. But it was a team that no success since the 70s for the most part, and so that was tough, because now you're fighting for that national attention. You've got the the LeBrons and the Durants and all of those guys, and trying to get John on that national stage, but you still got to focus locally. I mean, that's what it all comes down to. You got to sell tickets, you got to build that base, but they're very different fan bases. It's much different. There is something of DC fans are Wizards and Caps. Those do exist, but for the most part, strategies that you're going after with ticket sales, the sponsorship products, the flow of the game is just so different. The environment's so different, and so you can't leverage them together as much as you would like to. Mm-hmm. I mean, we were fortunate that Ovi and John would do a lot of stuff together, especially around the holidays, and as much as we could get them together. But for the most part, it's two completely different strategies. So that was the challenge of it, is making them both successful. Fortunately, back to the cannibalization issue, you didn't have that so much. People weren't really picking between a Caps game and a Wizards game. I mean, there are some of the long-term DC fans that might be, but it's such a transient city too. You don't really have the lifelong fanhood that you get in a New York and a Philly. I mean, it exists, but not nearly to the extent. You've got a lot of people that came down, especially when the Caps were new. I mean, not new, but when they were sort of becoming good, you had people that they're a Flyers fan, they're a Caps fan unless they play the Flyers, they're a Caps fan unless they play the Rangers, because and there's a lot of that, all around both sides. The Wizards were similar, Lakers fans, Celtics fans, there's a lot of those in the market that will gravitate to the Wizards, to trying to capitalize them and really kind of trying to convert that over. But that was the biggest challenge between the two, is running two in-market campaigns and getting people excited about it when you couldn't entirely leverage them together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's hockey and basketball, it's always interesting because they're, especially come playoff time, it's always like kind of opposite nights almost. Like, okay, who's playing tonight? Okay, it's hockey tonight. All right, let's get in the mindset of hockey. And then the next night, it's like, all right, this is basketball. It's just completely different, especially that kind of 2-week period of the finals in a normal world, which I think we'd be coming up to in, only like about a month at this point, not even. It's just always very interesting. And I thoroughly enjoy it. Just kind of that opposite back and forth. Like, hey, we got some incredible playoff game going every night. But especially as you were saying, like on a Tuesday in February, when the Wizards aren't that great and they're playing, I'll say it, like the Memphis Grizzlies. No offense to the Grizzlies. Now they have John Wall, but that just of like, how did you go about just trying to get, as you said, you don't want to cannibalize yourself. You can't really utilize the two teams together. How difficult was it for you? You kind of alluded to it before, but learning an entire new set of strategies or learning to do things completely different after everything you were doing at the Capitals was an absolute success in everyone else's book.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, there's not a lot of difference between the tactics that you use.
Hmm.
It's more that's where the analytics really come into play. Who are you going after, in what media, with what message? But at the end of the day, marketing is marketing, and so we were able to leverage a lot of learnings and how we analyze things really together.
Hmm.
But yeah, and it was interesting when I jumped over the Wizards side. They were in a similar position with the Caps. So when I first started the Caps, it was, all right, we got to sell it. Rangers are coming on a Friday. We got to sell that game out. We got to kill it. And then eventually it was, oh, that game's going to sell out. All right, Tuesday against Florida. Let's focus on that one.
Hmm.
And so, Wizards became similar of, let's make sure we sell out the weekend games. If we can sell out half the season, that's going to be awesome. Lakers on a Saturday, yeah, you're good. Yeah, Memphis on a Tuesday, we don't focus as much. Well, but then when that became the only games you weren't selling out, you could switch to that and really focus more on that. So knowing when to spend those dollars and where to go after it. And, we took a lot of learnings from the Caps in-game entertainment. We got a lot of praise for that, transitioning some of that over to the Wizards and, because the in-game piece of it, across the NBA is huge. And so, really making it a part of the show, and how we focused on that and using the court as a stage. That was nice that, with hockey, you can't really do that. With the NBA, you've got your own stage right there to do whatever you want to with it every break, every halftime, pregame, whatever. So it really opens up, the entertainment aspect of it too. And can give people an added value, even if the team's not doing as good, you're at least going to come out and have fun. And that was always our goal. Hopefully the team wins, but if nothing else, you're going to see exciting stars. You're going to get entertained, and hopefully that'll keep bringing you back. But, learning that side of it from the Caps, the entertainment piece, leveraging some of that. And the NBA is really supportive too. I mean, from learning from what other teams are doing and what's working. I mentioned, John Bishop, back when I was at the Bulls, and he was my mentor there. Now he's in the NBA, so engaging with the whole league office and learning and guiding and ideas from them and the data that they would share. They're far ahead of the curve. So that helps out a lot, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's very important, just kind of what it's like with minor league baseball. When you're referring to the Bulls, the Durham Bulls, if I'm not mistaken, because I don't remember the Chicago Bulls anywhere. Now that we're all thinking about The Last Dance, though, and how incredible that was, man, how easy would it have been if Michael Jordan was on your team, right? You didn't have to do anything at that point. That would have been killer.
Like that looked really smart then.
Yeah, right. Well, hey, Alexander Ovechkin's pretty darn good in his own right, so I think that's great. And with Monumental, when you're over at Monumental Sports and Entertainment, one thing I think is really cool, you have a couple of the Emmys in the background. So anyone watching the YouTube or the live stream right now, they might be able to see them. I can see them because I know where they are, but there's a couple of them back there. You eventually won 5. So I do want to talk about that. One thing that with your career in marketing and the analytics, it continued to get better over time. And not only did it the analytics continue to get better, the places you got them got better, and the new platforms, all these social media platforms, and really needing to go hard into them and really understanding what they're all about. At Monumental, you were also able to institute an over-the-top platform, an OTT streaming platform that allowed people to watch and understand. So let's talk about the marketing aspect first, especially over your entire career. What was it like? You kind of came in and you started this marketing analytic craze, it sounds like. What was it like learning more about these new platforms that are coming about, like social media, like OTT, that allowed you to get your message out there in a more specific way, again, to people that you liked, and you got even more analytics from it because it was all online?
Yep. Yeah, so it's interesting. I think I mentioned back when I was with the Carolina Hurricanes, when I did my project at Duke back in 03, 04, and we analyzed where all the marketing spend was and what's driving the return. Social media was nowhere on that, in that table. And so just kind of see the evolution of, it's something that fans use to engage with each other. And, oh, yeah, it's out there. We're not really thinking much of it, to where it then transitions to, well, I'm used to, going out, trying to push my message out to people, radio, TV, whatever it is. But now we've got to transition to where are the fans? They're on Facebook now. Now Instagram's becoming big. Players are getting engaged on there, and the data that you can get from that, especially off of Facebook, is phenomenal. And so, and that's something that then the sponsors really start clamoring for too. Because I don't have to go and find an audience. The audience is there. I just have to create relevant content for them, being able to, ensure it stays authentic as you integrate sponsors into it. Players, hopefully they're engaging with you as well. But it was really interesting to see, again, we talked about, there was no analytics teams before. There were also no social media teams before. It was something that, hey, maybe your PR guys would kind of run, and then your web guys, and they'll kind of do it on the side. But then you don't know which platforms are going to become big. Are you getting into Facebook? Are you getting into Tumblr? Now Instagram. There's this new Twitter thing. I remember our web guy at the Cat started talking about Twitter and how we needed to be on and aggressive. We have no idea what, nobody's going to want to do that. 140 characters, nobody cares. And so to kind of then see the evolution of it and how you tie into it and how you weave your messaging into it, and especially then when everybody gets on board, that's when the authenticity really, really kicks in, because people are just going to start ignoring you over time. So it wasn't just what platform are you on, then how do you engage and how that engagement changes. But then, the analytics piece of it was really nice to really know, hey, who's following us, who's following our brands, what's the overlap, how are we reaching them? A lot of third-party tools started popping up that we could really tie into there and take a look at. And so, went from, our web guys kind of doing social media part of the time to now we got full-time, now we got somebody else, now we've got 3 people just running our social platforms. And so that growth was really interesting to then, OTT, when that started coming about. We started talking about, people cutting the cord, and, people, not watching cable as much, and then, the Roku started popping up and some of the apps. And so immediately what kind of came to mind was, the Emmys behind me, we won those, our Caps TV show, or a couple of them initially, prior to the OTT, and so we were creating great weekly team content. But then it evolved to, well, we're outsourcing our video production. Well, now we've got the Wizards and the Mystics, so it makes sense to bring it in-house. And so we bring it in-house. But it's like, are we really monetizing this? Are we really creating the content? We've got better access to owners, coaches, players, fans than anybody else out there. Now I've got the means to produce video. Let's start doing it. Let's take advantage of this, all these assets that nobody else has. If you want to do something with Ovi, well, he's right downstairs. PR guy can go, talk him into it, and you start churning out content. And so we would really start, pumping out. We hired a 30-person, production department, and we built, through a couple of partners, we built out, an OTT platform, a web platform, started churning out content, and because that's where people were going, similar to the Facebooks and the Instagrams, that's where people were. Now they're not going to cable as much anymore, especially, the millennials that were trying to, get on board and become Cats fans. If they don't have cable, they're tied to the games. Well, now I'm going to have a platform to give you that content. And so that was a big piece of our strategy there. And, it was really interesting. I didn't know a lot about the video production world. Some people might still say I don't, but to really build out a full production capability, to really go and build platforms that nobody else was doing. Snag Films was a company that Ted had invested in, and they really had the technology behind it and became the ViewLift platform. So then we were able to have them build out our apps and all of that sort of stuff. So that was a really, really cool piece of it. And, having those partnerships to help us out was great. But, it was, same thing. OTT, when we first had the conversations, we didn't really know much about it, but it seemed to make sense, and was something that, fortunately, Ted is going to be really supportive of, going out and creating new properties. And our sponsorship guys always want more assets to sell, and fans always want more content. Back to our 12-month strategy, it's a new way to engage them every day with new content. And if I'm going to, create it, put it out on my own platform. I don't need to rely on somebody else's platform. And so that was sort of the genesis of it.
And I think, first off, jokes on those people that say you don't know much about production because you're the guy with the 5 Emmys, right? So, jokes on them. But with each of these, social media now it's kind of, you can't think of a world without it almost, right? But when it was first coming about, you're right. Like, who the hell wanted to be on Twitter? It's 140 characters. You can't say much. Why are we here? And it's always funny kind of seeing those really, really old tweets of like what Steph Curry was talking about. It's like, hey, I'm going to get some Chinese food. It's like, awesome. Thanks for that, man. We really appreciate it. And now what we're in now, which is essentially like kind of 3.0 of what Twitter's become. How long how much time, effort, energy, and money do you put into something before you kind of can say, okay, this is working. Like, this is the right thing to do in terms of building out a production team and creating an OTT platform to allow our fans to engage closer with Alexander Ovechkin. Like, how does that process work? And I guess at what point do you say, yes, this was a success, or no, let's keep putting money in it until it becomes a success? Like, how does that
Right.
process work?
Yeah, I mean, social media was, certainly a lot easier because
Yeah.
it didn't, outside of the hours into it, didn't really cost you anything. I mean, getting on Facebook, getting on Instagram. I mean, as you start building out new, apps and that sort of stuff, certainly it would. But that was easy. Production, it's a little bit different. And it's both. When does it make sense to spend that money, and how much you're going to end up spending? So we outsourced to a company called Base Productions, who produced a lot of awesome stuff for us for a lot of years. And so we knew what we were already spending with those guys. So if I could come in at a cheaper rate and produce more content, it made sense. And we knew that we're going to need to produce in-game content. We knew you're always going to have an opening video. You're going to have player profiles that you're dropping into all the intermissions. You're going to need to interview players after the game and put it on your site. And so there's that stuff that we would always going to have, whether or not, the additional shoulder programming people are going to be interested in, or as we start going out to high school, stream some basketball games, profile stuff, getting out of the community, those aspects. You really didn't know, but if you start with that baseline of this is what we know we're going to have to produce, and we're going to get some top level talent in that's going to do that, and then you can always kind of scale up, scale down beyond that based on what's resonated with people and what sponsorship dollars are coming in for it. We started with that baseline, which we knew we had to have, and then the staffing model becomes interesting. And so I contracted out with a couple of different, super senior, been in the business 20, 30 years, producers that helped us really structure it, bring in the right talent, because you need the one-man band going out and, producing a piece and editing it themselves, putting it on the site, we need to be able to produce Mystics games and stream them live on our platform, and so all of those different aspects to it. I learned a lot about just how it's all structured and how to really build it out. But then, how much you put into your facilities, when do you need a studio? How nice of a studio do you develop? And some of that just kind of comes over time. You can do it not on the cheap, but you can do it to, make sure that the content's resonating with people and resonating with sponsors. And then you can start investing a little more. But it's not too bad to kind of ramp up, ramp down once people are into it.
Yeah, and I think that part's very important. And again, I'm sure you had all the numbers and all the analytics and all the data on it, and how well it was doing and how you could take advantage of it, and how, as you were talking about with sponsors, it's just another way to engage fans, which means it's another way for sponsors and partners to, find a way to engage fans, which then allows you guys to make more money, which, right, like you're making money in multiple different facets on that end, which I think is really important. So with that, I'm kind of curious. It sounds like you were having a lot of fun. You're doing a lot of really cool things. What made you leave the team game, I guess, spending so much time with the Eagles, the Redskins, the Capitals, the Wizards, the Mystics? At what point, and I guess for what reason, did you think, that was a lot of fun, I kind of want to go do something else now?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great ride with Monumental. I mean, left with a lot of great relationships and couldn't get any better experiences. And, but it was, at the end, we're doing, Mystics, Wizards, Caps. We were launching AFL, and as I was kind of looking at new opportunities, it kind of became, well, is this really where I want to be? Is this the hours? As you start having a family, I was fortunate. We live around Capitol Hill, so I only live 2 miles from the Verizon Center. So commute home and to work for me with the family, it was as good as it could have possibly been. But you start looking at, hey, what else is out there? Before I commit to staying on the team side, and geography for me was important too. We wanted to get back south. That's how we landed back in Atlanta, where we are now. We've been back here for a couple of years. But a buddy of mine had latched onto this loyalty platform out of Chicago. Really cool opportunity. We kind of built our own teams. It's like, yeah, let's try something different. It's the tech side of it, and the loyalty and the data around what we were doing there was really cool, and I want to be a part of it and try something different. Because you can always go do something different for a while, and if that didn't work out, you can always go back. And so that was sort of the philosophy. And I had opportunities to do stuff with sports as well. So the platform called Shop Your Way. So I worked there about 2.5 years out of Chicago, commuting up there. But we also there's an arena, about a 10,000 seat arena. So I got to sit on the other side of the table there and negotiate the naming rights deal on behalf of Sears and Shop Your Way. And so I got to be a part of that. I did a really cool, when the hurricanes hit Puerto Rico a couple of years ago, Javi Baez, Rene Rivera partnered up with those guys, donated a bunch of shirts, products. We donated 25,000 toys to kids to give them a Christmas that year. We had Rene, and his wife and a lot of our staff was going around Puerto Rico with Santa and a big sled delivering all those toys. And, so I still had the engagement with the player side, with the sponsorship side, separate from marketing the loyalty platform. So I got to kind of satisfy that itch a bit, but then, as my contract there was starting to end, started thinking, hey, really missed the sports side. It's the marketing is marketing wherever you go, but a product that you really care about and you really want to engage. It's, what I care about, but also a product that people care so much about. It is so impactful for them. And so, wanting to get back on that side, towards the end of last year is what kind of got me going again.
Well, fan is short for fanatic, right? We're all crazy when it comes to our sports teams. And I think, again, you're right. Marketing is marketing, but there's going to be a ravenous base, right? There's always those loyal fans that are just absolutely crazy. That they're gonna show up. They're gonna show out whether your team is terrible or good. I'm a Giants fan through and through. And after every loss, I put my Giants sweatshirt on the next day and I let people know that, hey, I'm taking this one on the chin. Give me whatever you got at this point. So it is what it is. And so tell us a little bit. So now you're with NextUp Ventures. You're a co-founder there, correct? So what exactly are you guys doing, and why did you find, what have you been doing, as you said, since towards the end of last year, that made sense to start, working with some of these tech in this tech space a little bit more and really start helping out some of these startups?
Yeah, so something kind of thought about, and my co-founders and advisors, we've kind of talked for a while about at some point going out and doing our own thing. And as sports startups really become more prevalent, having a lot of conversations with new CEOs, people trying to get their businesses up and running, just from a networking standpoint. I mean, back to what I was doing at Duke, no different now. Just talking to anybody and everybody, and as I get to Atlanta and really meet people that are doing some cool stuff, it's always like, yeah, I can. I'm passionate about, what they're doing and what they're building, and, being a part of something different than, I love the team side, I love the player side, but the new business side of it was really interesting to me, and really talking to these passionate entrepreneurs and what they were doing. But then something, had to kind of push us over the edge to do it. And so, as my contract was ending with Shop Your Way, we're going to decide not to renew that. That was, we had an opportunity with a company called Starstock. Starstock.com. Scott Greenberg, really awesome CEO there. The guys at FanDuel are supporting it. It's essentially a marketplace for sports cards. So, kind of creates it like the stock market. They actually just launched about a week ago, the platform, like the early version of it. But, we had an opportunity through those guys to make an investment. And so really excited about what they were doing, really excited talking to Scott. So that's what kind of forced us to say, let's create this NextUp Ventures. We want to invest. We invested our own money into it. And so that's sort of where it started, was this first investment that we were passionate about it and what they were doing, which then led to additional conversations with other entrepreneurs. And so that was sort of the venture side of it, helping raise money, helping at least make introductions for people to raise money, putting some of our own money into it. But then, there's a gap also with the startups. Of a lot of them are really heavy on the tech side, really strong CEOs. A lot of time, and that's what you're investing in for the most part, is the CEOs of these companies. But from a marketing, operations, product management, some of those, kind of the ideas started popping up. Well, maybe there's more of an opportunity here. We don't want to just be writing checks. We want to get in, roll our sleeves up, and so that's where this NextUp Partners idea came from. So that's a sister company to Ventures, where what we're really doing is going out, and we're not just working with startups. For the partner side, it's a lot of times more advanced, not super early. Because they're getting into like the Series A, or even some more established companies, brands that are trying to get into the sports space. Really trying to focus on where they have needs. Sometimes operational, sometimes it could be helping them find capital, or at least helping them with their pitch decks. A lot of times, helping with sales decks. A lot of times it's helping them get PR. What's their social strategy? How they get their website up and running. What branding do you need? And so filling those holes. what we've done is build up a team of, managing directors and consultants, some that have their own side businesses as well. But really the power of this group, right now we've got about 10, we'll finally, within the next couple of weeks, we'll have a team of about 15, senior level execs from all over sports, from apparel to tech, to, we got, some really, top-notch creative, best in the business there. We've got, a guy coming on that's got a strong data background. We got a guy that's helping us with PR. So whatever a company would need, we're now a full service agency that goes beyond the retainer deal to a roll your sleeves up, fractional exec opportunities that we want to get in and really help these startups grow. So, I think the team that we built is really exciting. We're going to get, it'll become more public over the next week or two, exactly who's on it. I need to get the LinkedIn page built out a little more, but we're going to get that built out and people will be able to see who the team is. But yeah, really excited about the team that we've built and what we're able to bring to the table to help out a lot of these, early to mid-sized startups and even some other brands. I mean, we've got guys that have worked for the biggest brands, the biggest agencies in the world, bringing that experience to it. So we're really excited about it. And, I think leaving the shop your way kind of, that was a good forcing mechanism, the opportunity to invest. And then, certainly the coronavirus too, it was, now's an opportunity. There's, if I wanted to find a full-time job somewhere, it's probably not the best time to go looking. So it's really a good forcing mechanism too, to, not do something that I don't really want to do something that I'm passionate about. And, that's really what we've created here. And, I think over the last couple of weeks, it's come together really fast. And, we're talking to, a new sports startup league. There's a lot of, cool stuff that we're doing with those guys. There's a gamified social app. There's another company, Jason Fox, former NFL player, started a company called earbudsmusic.com. They're doing some really cool. You talk about social meets players, meets music, meets a new way to engage. He's doing some really awesome stuff. And so we developed a good relationship there. So just learning and talking to all of these different companies has been phenomenal. And so, really excited about what else is out there and the relationships that we're going to keep building.
I think it's so cool what you guys are able to build. And again, it goes back to, as you said, at Duke, it's all about relationship. How many phone calls did you have to take this time? It probably wasn't as many to get so many of these guys on your team, but it's just the fact that you've done so much. You've shown your capabilities, your value that you could bring to others. And now you're bringing together this team of 15 incredible, it sounds like 15 just absolutely incredible executives from all over the sports world that, as you said, fractional execs, we can help with the networking, getting you in the right places, potentially fund some of these businesses. So I think just from that perspective and with as much networking as I do within the sports industry, which clearly I have a while till I get anywhere close to where you are, Joe, but just learning so much about these just cool different businesses that are going around, and all they just need is that little extra push occasionally. Just give them that extra push, and then they can really show their stuff to the world and let the world decide if they're capable, and then people want to utilize them. But I just think it's so darn cool what you guys have been able to put together and some of the things that you're going to be doing in the future. That very, very grateful that I got to have you on today. So thank you for that. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, I love talking about it. And, like I said, we'll have the website up and running soon. I got the LinkedIn page. Anybody wants to look me up on LinkedIn, or, Joe at nextupventures.net. So we got a lot of exciting stuff we're rolling out soon. We want to talk to anybody and everybody. I mean, we're not going to, even, some of the ones I've mentioned, maybe we engage, maybe we don't, maybe we invest, maybe we help, but you never know what connections we can help make with somebody else. And you never know what might arise down the road, getting ourselves out there, and, maybe we meet a startup and maybe it's not us, but we, pair the right relationships up there. And, we want to help out and just get excited. The more, entrepreneurs I talk to, the more excited we get about what's out there and where we can help or where we can find people to help. And just being a part of that community to us is really exciting. So,
I love it. I love it, man. I'll make sure all the links.
Yeah.
I'll make sure all the links are up in the show notes, and you got everything there. So if anyone does want to get at you, I'll make sure to get that email from you as well, so that everything's there. I'll put the LinkedIn page in there, so that way when people do check that out, when it is updated today, maybe tomorrow, whenever that is, that everything will be up and you'll be able to rock and roll there. But Joe, this has been absolutely incredible. Joe Dupriest, managing partner, co-founder of NextUp Ventures, NextUp Partners. Joe, sincerely appreciate your time today, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's been great. And hopefully we'll do a follow-up later on.